I was 14 the first time I met Karis. It was the first week of high school, that awkward in-between age where everyone is still trying to figure out who they are supposed to be. I remember standing alone by the lockers, clutching my schedule like it was some kind of shield, pretending to study it so I wouldn't look like I had no one to talk to. Then, out of nowhere, this boy with dark hair, falling carelessly over his forehead, came up beside me. "You're Adam, right?" he asked, his voice carrying a kind of ease that I could never manage at that age. I nodded, startled that he even knew my name. "Yeah, and you're?" "Karis," he said, grinning as though we had already been friends forever. "We've got English together, and you're blocking my locker." That was how it began. Just like that. No grand story, no dramatic moment, just a smile and a teasing remark that pulled me out of my shell. From that day forward, he seemed to be everywhere. We sat next to each other in class, partnered up for projects, and ended up on the same basketball team after school. It was almost like life had been waiting for us to meet, and once we did, it kept shoving us into each other's paths. I wasn't used to friendships being easy. Most of the time, I felt like I had to prove myself, to adjust and bend to fit into groups. With Karis, I didn't have to try. He just accepted me, laughed at my awkward jokes, and filled silences with his effortless stories. Before I knew it, he was the person I spent most of my time with. By the time we were 16, we had established our own traditions. Friday nights usually meant I was at his house or he was at mine. Sometimes we'd stay up playing video games until sunrise, the glow of the TV flickering across our tired faces while his mom complained in the morning that we never let her sleep. Other times, we'd sit outside in the yard, lying on our backs, watching the stars while talking about the kind of men we wanted to become. He'd tell me his dreams about traveling the world, working in a job that didn't tie him down, maybe living by the sea. I confessed my fears about not being good enough, about failing before I even got a chance to start. And he'd nudge me with his elbow, grinning like he could see the future, and say, "You're going to be fine, Adam. You've got more in you than you think." Some nights, when the world felt heavy, I found myself staying at his place just for the comfort of not being alone. His room always smelled faintly of books and that cologne his older brother had left behind, and the sound of his steady breathing was sometimes all I needed to finally fall asleep. He never asked questions on the nights when I seemed quieter than usual. He just let me be, as though he knew I'd talk when I was ready. The years slipped by like that. We went from high school boys to college students navigating a bigger world, but the friendship remained the same. We still called each other late at night, still had the kind of conversations that left me lying awake long after, replaying every word. And yet, something was changing too. Something unspoken, something neither of us dared to name. There were moments that made my chest ache in ways I didn't understand at first. The way he'd drape an arm across my shoulders when we walked together. The way his laugh made me feel lighter, as though I'd been holding my breath until that very sound gave me permission to exhale. The way I noticed how his face had sharpened as he grew older, how his eyes seemed to hold more weight than before. Sometimes, when I stayed over, I'd catch myself watching him as he slept. His hair would fall into his face, and I'd resist the ridiculous urge to brush it aside. My heart would pound, and I'd turn away quickly, ashamed at what those feelings meant. We never spoke about it, but I often wondered if he felt the same, if the pauses between our laughter, the silences where we just looked at each other, meant as much to him as they did to me. There was this one night during our first year of college when everything almost spilled over. We had come back from party, both of us a little tipsy, a little too honest. We sat on the floor of his room, backs against the bed, the glow of the desk lamp soft against the walls. "Do you ever think," he asked suddenly, staring at the ceiling, "that maybe some people are just meant to stick around in your life forever?" I remember my chest tightening, my throat dry. "Yeah," I said quietly. "I think about that a lot." He turned to look at me, his expression unreadable, his eyes searching mine. For a moment, it felt like the world had stilled, like we were on the edge of something we couldn't take back. My heart hammered so loud I thought he could hear it. But then he laughed softly, shook his head, and said, "Good, because you're stuck with me, Adam." I laughed too, but a part of me ached at what was left unsaid. The truth was, I had been in love with him for years without fully admitting it to myself. Love had crept in slowly, disguised as friendship, wrapped in shared jokes and late-night talks. It wasn't the kind of love that demanded to be shouted from rooftops. It was quiet, patient, content just to exist. But it was there, undeniable and constant, woven into every memory we had together. Even in the happiest moments, there was a kind of longing I couldn't shake. When he hugged me, I wanted to hold on just a little longer. When he smiled, I wanted to be the reason for it. And when he talked about his dreams, I secretly hoped I'd always be a part of them. Looking back, those years were some of the sweetest and most painful of my life. Sweet because I had him, his laughter, his loyalty, his presence beside me through everything. Painful because I couldn't tell him the truth. I couldn't risk breaking what we had by admitting what I felt. So I stayed silent, pretending friendship was enough, even though my heart whispered otherwise every time his hand brushed against mine or our eyes lingered too long on each other's faces. And maybe, just maybe, he felt it too. There's a certain comfort that comes from knowing someone sees you, really sees you, and chooses to stay anyway. That's what Karis was for me. He made the world less sharp, less complicated. Around him, I didn't have to explain myself, didn't have to wear masks or pretend to be braver than I was. He had this way of reading me without asking questions, of understanding silences as well as words. Whenever life became too much, I found myself drawn to him, like a compass needle always pointing back to the same place. With Karis, I could let my guard down. I could talk about the things I was afraid of, the failures, the insecurities, the doubts that crept in late at night, and instead of brushing them aside, he'd listen. Sometimes he'd crack a joke to make me laugh. Other times, he'd just sit quietly and let me untangle myself, like he knew I didn't need answers, just presence. And in those moments, I felt safe. Cherished even. But safety can be dangerous when your heart wants more. I never wanted to admit it, even to myself, but there were moments when I caught myself longing for something deeper. Like the way his hand would rest casually on my knee when we were sitting side by side on the couch. Or the way he'd drape his arm around my shoulders when we were walking together, pulling me in closer without a second thought. To anyone else, it looked like nothing more than the casual affection of a long friendship. To me, it was everything. It was the warmth of something I couldn't name. And yet, every time my heart reached for more, my head pulled me back. We were just friends. That was the rule, the unspoken line neither of us dared to cross. Friendship was safe. Friendship was steady. But love threatened to unravel everything we'd built. Still, the feelings refused to stay buried. They leaked out in subtle ways, in the way I lingered when he hugged me, in the way my laughter came a little easier around him, in the way I memorized the lines of his face without even realizing it. Of course, those feelings became harder to hide when someone else entered the picture. It happened more often than I wanted to admit. A girl from our class would brush her hair back and laugh a little too loudly at his jokes. Or someone at a party would lean just a bit too close when they spoke to him. And each time, my chest would tighten with a sharp, unexplainable ache. I'd tell myself it was nothing, just protectiveness, just habit, but deep down I knew what it really was. Jealousy. I hated the way it burned in me, the way it made me withdraw into silence while he chatted effortlessly with someone new. I'd watch the easy smile on his face, the way his eyes softened, and wonder if he'd ever look at me like that. If he already did, but I was too afraid to believe it. One night in particular stays with me. We were at a small gathering with some college friends. The music was low, the drinks flowing, and I found myself standing off to the side while Karis talked with a girl named Elaine. She was smart, funny, beautiful, and she was hanging on his every word. I remember watching him laugh at something she said, his hand brushing against her arm as naturally as if he'd done it 100 times before. Something in me twisted. I forced a smile, forced a laugh when someone else tried to pull me into conversation, but all I could think about was how much I wished I were in her place. Later that night, when it was just the two of us walking back to his apartment, I couldn't stop the bitterness in my voice. Elaine seems to really like you. Karis shrugged, stuffing his hands into his pockets. Yeah, she's cool. I kicked at the sidewalk, trying to sound casual. You like her back? He glanced at me, eyes narrowing slightly as though he were trying to read me. Not really. She's nice, but not my type. My heart leapt at his words, but I quickly smothered it. I couldn't afford to hope too much. And what is your type? I asked, trying to sound playful. He smiled faintly, looking away. Someone who just gets me, I guess. Someone who feels like home. I didn't push further, though every part of me wanted to. I wondered if he realized I was standing right beside him, wondering if I'd ever be that home for him. That was how it always went with us. A dance of almosts and maybes, of words left unsaid. We lived in the in-between space, where every touch carried more weight than it should, where every glance felt like a confession neither of us dared to speak. Sometimes I thought he knew. Sometimes I caught him watching me too, his gaze lingering a little too long, his smile softening in ways it didn't with others. Once, when we were lying side by side on his bed after a long night of studying, I swear his hand brushed against mine and stayed there for just a second longer than necessary. Long enough for my heart to skip, short enough to leave me questioning if I'd imagined it. We both pretended nothing happened, of course. That was the unspoken rule. Pretend it's friendship. Pretend the air between us isn't charged, that the silences aren't heavy with the weight of everything we're not saying. And maybe it was enough. Maybe just having him close was all I needed. At least, that's what I told myself. I told myself I was happy with what we had, that friendship was safer than risking rejection, that silence was easier than the truth. But deep down, I knew the truth was inevitable. Feelings like mine don't stay hidden forever. They either die or they burst free, and I wasn't sure which fate awaited mine. For now, though, I kept smiling, kept laughing, kept pretending. Pretending friendship was enough. Pretending I wasn't falling in love with my best friend. It was one of those nights when I couldn't sit still. The city felt alive outside my window, the air carrying that electric hum that makes you feel like something is waiting for you just around the corner. I was restless, and all I could think about was Karis. We hadn't seen each other much that week. Assignments, work, life pulling us in different directions. I missed him more than I wanted to admit. Missed the comfort of his voice. The way just being near him made the world feel steadier. And maybe deep down I was tired of keeping everything inside. Maybe I wanted to see him and feel, even for a few hours, that he was mine. So, on impulse, I grabbed my jacket and headed out into the night. It wasn't planned. I didn't text him ahead of time. I just decided I'd surprise him. That was the kind of thing we used to do all the time when we were younger, showing up at each other's doors with snacks, with stories, with the unspoken promise of hours together. I wanted that again. As I walked through the quiet streets toward his apartment, excitement buzzed in my chest. My mind wandered, imagining his reaction when he saw me at the door. I pictured his smile, the way his eyes would light up. I imagined us sitting side by side, laughing over old memories, maybe falling into one of those long, deep talks that stretched until dawn. I reached his building, climbed the steps two at a time, and stopped in front of his door. For a moment, I hesitated, heart pounding, trying to decide whether to knock or just text him that I was outside. Before I could decide, though, something caught my attention. A sound. It was faint at first, just a muffled noise drifting through the hallway. I tilted my head, frowning. Then I realized it was coming from Karis's room. I told myself not to pry, but curiosity tugged at me, pulling me closer. The closer I got, the clearer the sound became. Laughter, a voice that wasn't his. And then, yummy, yummy. The words were playful, drawn out, followed by more laughter, more muffled sounds that twisted into something unmistakable. My stomach dropped. My pulse raced, not with excitement anymore, but with something darker, sharper. I moved toward the side of the building where his bedroom window faced the street. The blinds were half drawn, just enough to leave a gap. I knew I shouldn't look. I knew I was crossing a line. But my feet moved on their own, driven by the sick churn in my chest, the desperate need to know. I stood on tiptoe, peering through the narrow opening. And that's when I saw him. Karis. In his room. Not alone. There was another man with him, older, maybe mid-30s, his build broader, his presence filling the space in a way that made me feel small, insignificant. They were close, too close. The man was laughing, leaning toward Karis, his hands brushing against him in ways I had only dared to dream about. The sound of their voices, the easy intimacy, the repeated yummy yummy that floated out into the night. It all hit me like a punch to the chest. I froze, staring, unable to look away. My mind screamed at me to leave, but my body betrayed me, rooted to the spot as though watching would somehow make sense of it. My heart pounded painfully, my throat tightening until I could barely breathe. This was supposed to be my night, my surprise, my chance to feel close to him again. Instead, I was on the outside, literally and figuratively, peering into a life that didn't belong to me. 1,000 emotions clashed inside me all at once. Jealousy, fierce, ugly, clawing at my insides as I watched someone else touch him in ways I never had the courage to. Confusion, because hadn't there always been something between us? Hadn't I felt it in the way he looked at me, in the way we hovered at the edge of something more? Betrayal, because even though we'd never spoken the words, hadn't our closeness meant something? Hadn't it always been more than friendship? And heartbreak, sharp, overwhelming, leaving me gasping for air as tears pricked at my eyes. I stumbled back from the window, my hand gripping the brick wall as though it could steady me. I felt sick. The sound from inside followed me like ghosts, laughter, murmurs, that mocking phrase, yummy, yummy. I wanted to run inside, to demand answers, to scream and cry and tell him that he had no right to give himself to someone else when he already had my heart. But what right did I have? He wasn't mine. He had never been mine. All those years of longing, of quiet love, of silences heavy with unspoken words, they were mine alone. I pressed a hand over my mouth, trying to hold back the sob that rose in my throat. The night air was cool against my skin, but it did nothing to soothe the fire burning in my chest. My vision blurred with tears as I turned away from the window, my legs moving on autopilot. I couldn't stay there another second. I walked away quickly, my footsteps echoing on the empty street. Each step felt heavier than the last, as though the weight of everything I'd just seen was dragging me down. My mind replayed the scene over and over, torturing me with images I couldn't erase. Karis's laughter, his closeness with that man, the ease of their connection, it haunted me. By the time I reached my own apartment, I was shaking. I closed the door behind me and collapsed onto the couch, burying my face in my hands. The tears came then, hot and uncontrollable, spilling out in a rush I couldn't stop. I had never felt so utterly alone. All the memories, all the years of friendship, all the moments of almost love, they twisted inside me now, tainted by the sight of him with someone else. I had convinced myself that what we had was special, that maybe one day it would be more. But now, staring into the darkness of my empty apartment, I wondered if I had only been fooling myself. Maybe I was just his friend, nothing more. And maybe he had already found what I'd been too afraid to ask for. I didn't knock on his door. I didn't call his name. I didn't even let myself breathe too loudly as I backed away from that window. Something inside me had cracked, and I knew if I stayed a moment longer, I'd shatter completely. So I left, quietly, like a thief who had stolen something that was never his to begin with. The walk home felt endless. Each step was heavy, my legs moving only because they had to, my chest hollow, as if all the air had been sucked out of me. The night that had once felt alive now seemed cruel, mocking. I kept hearing echoes of his laughter, those muffled sounds spilling out of his room, the playful words that had cut me so deeply. Yummy, yummy. The phrase looped in my mind, a taunt, a reminder of how foolish I had been to believe I was special to him. When I finally closed the door of my apartment behind me, the silence hit me hard. I dropped my jacket onto the floor, sank onto the couch, and pressed the heels of my hands into my eyes, as if I could rub away the images burned into them. But no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't unsee what I had seen. I thought of all the nights we had spent side by side, lying on the floor, talking about the future. The way his head would tilt back when he laughed, the way his hand would brush mine and linger, just long enough to make me wonder, I thought of the way he'd always been there for me, listening when I couldn't talk to anyone else, showing up without me asking. Those memories felt like a different lifetime now, softened by nostalgia, but sharp with betrayal. And the question that gnawed at me wasn't just why him, or why not me. It was, do I even have the right to feel this way? We had never confessed. We had never kissed. We had never said the words I'd repeated silently in my own head for years. I love you. I love you. I love you. To the world, we were friends. To him, maybe that's all we had ever been. And if that were true, then what right did I have to sit here, drowning in heartbreak? But the pain didn't care about logic. It didn't care that we'd never spoken aloud what lived between us. All it knew was that for years, I had built my life around him. I had chosen him in 100 quiet ways. In the way I canceled plans just to see him, in the way I picked up his favorite snacks without him asking, in the way I memorized his schedule so I'd know when he was free. My heart had already claimed him, even if my voice had been too cowardly to do the same. And now, someone else had stepped into the space I had been too afraid to occupy. I lay awake that night, staring at the ceiling, my thoughts unraveling in a storm I couldn't quiet. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw him with that man, laughing, smiling, letting himself be touched in ways I'd only ever dreamed of. My chest tightened until it hurt to breathe. Part of me wanted to march back to his place and demand an explanation, to ask him if everything we had shared meant nothing, to scream the truth I'd held back for years and let the pieces fall where they may. But another part of me, the larger part, was terrified. Terrified of hearing the answer I didn't want. Terrified that he would look me in the eye and tell me I had imagined it all, that I had been nothing more than a friend, a brother, a safe place to land until someone better came along. I tossed and turned, replaying every memory, searching for proof that what I felt hadn't been one-sided. The way his gaze lingered, the softness in his smile, the night he told me he wanted someone who felt like home. Hadn't that been a confession in disguise? Or had I twisted his words into something they were never meant to be? The storm inside me raged with no release. My heart pulled me one way, whispering that I deserved answers, that I couldn't go on pretending. My fear pulled me another, urging me to disappear, to protect what little remained of our friendship by burying the truth forever. At one point, I sat up, grabbed my phone, and typed out a message. We need to talk. My thumb hovered over the send button for a long time. Then, with a bitter laugh, I deleted it. I couldn't do it. Not yet. The clock ticked past midnight, then 2, then 4. Still I lay awake, my body exhausted, but my mind unwilling to rest. I thought of him lying in his bed across town, not alone, his chest rising and falling with the rhythm of sleep, while I drowned in questions he might never answer. By dawn, I was no closer to a decision. My eyes burned from lack of sleep, my heart bruised from beating too hard all night. I sat at the edge of my bed, staring at the pale light creeping through the blinds, and wondered what the hell I was supposed to do. Confront him and risk losing him forever? Or walk away silently, carrying this storm inside me until it tore me apart? For the first time in years, I didn't know if Karis was still my safe place. And that realization hurt more than anything else. The morning after felt like walking through fog. My body was heavy from lack of sleep, my eyes sore, and every thought pressed against my chest like a weight I couldn't shake. I tried to go about my day, coffee, shower, scrolling aimlessly on my phone, but nothing worked. Every sound seemed distant, every moment tinted with the same hollow ache. Karis with that man. By early afternoon, I was still staring at my phone, debating whether to text him. I didn't have to, though. His name lit up my screen before I could make up my mind. Karis, hey, you free? Haven't heard from you. Want to grab lunch? I stared at the message for a long time. My first instinct was to ignore it, to let him wonder why I was suddenly silent. But my fingers betrayed me, typing back a quick, yeah. Where? We met at a little cafe we'd been going to since college, a familiar place with chip tables and the smell of coffee beans that clung to the walls. He was already there when I walked in, sitting by the window, waving at me with that easy smile I used to love so much. For a moment, my chest tightened with longing. Then the memory of last night hit, and the smile looked like a knife. I slid into the seat across from him, my body tense, my hands shoved deep into my pockets. "You look tired," he said, studying me. "Didn't sleep?" I forced a shrug. "Rough night." His brow furrowed. "Everything okay?" I wanted to lie to brush it off, but the words caught in my throat. My silence must have said enough, because he leaned forward, eyes narrowing. "Adam, what's going on?" I laughed bitterly, shaking my head. "You really don't know?" His confusion only deepened. "Know what?" And then it all spilled out. I told him about last night, about going to surprise him, about the sounds I heard through his door. My voice cracked when I admitted I'd looked through the window, seen him with another man, heard the laughter, the playful words that had cut me so deeply. I told him how it felt like a betrayal, like years of friendship and quiet closeness had been swept aside in an instant. My words tumbled out fast, messy, raw. Anger, sadness, vulnerability, all of it pouring out after being locked up for too long. By the time I finished, my hands were shaking, my throat raw from the effort of holding back tears. Karras just stared at me, wide-eyed, his mouth slightly open. Then, slowly, he shook his head. "Adam, no, it's not what you think." I scoffed. "Don't do that. Don't pretend I didn't see what I saw." "I'm not pretending," he said firmly, his voice steadier than mine. "That man, his name's Daniel. He's a friend. He's been going through some heavy stuff lately. Divorce, money problems, you name it. He came over last night because he needed someone to talk to. And we were messing around, joking. The yummy thing, it was stupid, just us being idiots. That's all." I blinked, stunned. "You expect me to believe that?" "Yes," he said, his eyes holding mine with an intensity that made my heart race. "Because it's the truth. Adam, I swear to you, there's nothing between me and him. There's never been." The sincerity in his voice cut through my anger, but the hurt still burned. "Then why?" I trailed off, unable to finish the sentence. "Why did it feel like I was losing you? Why does it hurt this much if it wasn't real?" Karras leaned across the table, his voice low, almost trembling. "Because I've been a coward. Because I should have told you a long time ago what you mean to me." My breath caught. "What are you saying?" He ran a hand through his hair, exhaling shakily. "I've been in love with you for years, Adam. Years. But I was terrified. Terrified that if I said it out loud, I'd lose you. So I stayed quiet. I told myself friendship was enough. But every day, it killed me a little, pretending I didn't want more. The world seemed to tilt. My chest constricted, not with pain this time, but with something sharp and bright I hadn't dared to hope for. You love me?" I whispered. His eyes softened, his lips curving into the faintest smile. "Yeah, I love you. I always have." Tears blurred my vision, hot and overwhelming. I laughed bitterly, but it was shaky, broken. "Do you have any idea how long I've been waiting to hear you say that? How many nights I stayed awake, wondering if I was crazy for thinking there was something between us?" Karras reached across the table, his hand covering mine. His touch was warm, steady, grounding. "You're not crazy." I felt it too. Every hug, every late-night talk, every silence where it felt like the whole world stopped. I felt it too. My throat tightened, my voice breaking. "Then why didn't you say anything?" "Because I was scared," he admitted. "Scared of ruining the best thing in my life. Scared you didn't feel the same. And last night, when Daniel was joking around, I didn't even think about how it might look if someone saw. Because the truth is, the only person I've ever wanted to see me like that is you." The storm inside me, the one that had raged all night, began to quiet. The anger softened, replaced by a deep, aching relief. Still, I shook my head, overwhelmed. "You idiot," I whispered, my voice trembling with both laughter and tears. "You absolute idiot. Do you know how much pain we could have saved if you just said that earlier?" He laughed too, the sound thick with emotion. "Yeah, I know. Guess I'm just late to the party." I squeezed his hand, holding on as if letting go would undo everything we just confessed. "For the record," I said softly, "I've loved you too, for a long time." His eyes glistened, his thumb brushing over my knuckles. "Then let's stop pretending. No more hiding, no more silence. Just us." Finally, in that moment, the years of longing, the jealousy, the heartbreak, all of it melted away, leaving only the truth that had been there all along. We weren't just friends. We had never been just friends. We had been two people circling each other, too afraid to name what was already ours. And now, finally we had. The morning after our rawest, most vulnerable conversation, the world seemed different. I woke up with puffy eyes and a heavy head, but also with a strange lightness in my chest. 4 years, Karis had been my constant, my laughter in silence, my comfort in chaos, and for years I had tucked away my feelings, convinced they were too fragile to survive outside of my heart. Yet now, after everything, the truth was finally out between us. I wasn't sure how to behave when I saw him again. Would it be awkward? Would we stumble over our words, shy and unsure? Or would we fall back into the easy rhythm we had always known, only this time with nothing left hidden? When he knocked on my door later that morning, I hesitated for a moment before opening it. My pulse was racing, but when I saw him standing there, messy hair, tired eyes, that nervous half-smile that was so undeniably him, I felt something soften inside me. "Can I come in?" he asked quietly. I nodded, stepping aside. He slipped in, hands in his pockets like a boy afraid of breaking something precious. We didn't speak right away. We just stood there, the silence between us heavy but not unbearable. Finally, he sighed. "I couldn't sleep last night. All I kept thinking about was how close I came to losing you, without ever even having you." His words hit me deep. For a moment, all I could do was stare at him, my throat too tight to answer. Then, with a shaky breath, I whispered, "You almost did lose me. Not because of what I saw, but because I thought you'd never feel the same." He stepped closer, so close I could see the flecks of gold in his brown eyes. "Adam," he said, voice breaking, "I've been in love with you since we were kids. I just never thought I was enough. And I was terrified of ruining what we had." Something inside me cracked wide open. All the years of longing, the sleepless nights wondering what could be, the silent ache of jealousy, it all came pouring out in a flood of relief and tenderness. My lips trembled as I admitted, "I've loved you too, Karis. I always have." For a heartbeat, the world stood still. Then, almost without thinking, I reached for him. My hand brushed his cheek, and he leaned into my touch like he had been waiting for it his entire life. Slowly, cautiously, as though afraid the moment might shatter, he leaned forward. Our foreheads touched first, a soft press that felt more intimate than anything else. And then, our lips met. It wasn't perfect, not the way movies make it seem. It was trembling and tentative, our breaths shaky, our hearts racing. But it was real. It was everything. I felt the years of friendship, the hidden smiles, the stolen glances, the late-night talks, all of it weaving into that kiss. It wasn't just affection. It was history, longing, and love finally finding its voice. When we pulled apart, I couldn't help but laugh through my tears. "Took us long enough, didn't it?" Karis chuckled too, brushing his thumb across my cheek to wipe away the tears. "Yeah, but maybe it had to happen this way. Maybe we needed to almost lose each other to realize how much we mean." We sat down together, our shoulders touching, our hands tangled as though neither of us could bear to let go. We talked for hours, not just about us, but about everything. Our fears, our hopes, the future we wanted to build. It was strange how natural it felt to speak about us as more than friends. It didn't feel like stepping into something new. It felt like finally coming home. That night, we walked back to his house together. For the first time, I didn't hesitate when he reached for my hand in the open, even though we passed neighbors and familiar streets. Let them see. For years, I had hidden what I felt, but not anymore. When we reached his room, the same one that had nearly broken me just nights before, it felt different. The space wasn't haunted by misunderstandings or shadows anymore. It felt warm, safe, and ours. Karis pulled me close and whispered, "I don't want to waste another second pretending. You're it for me, Adam. You've always been it." And in his arms, I believed it. As the days turned into weeks, and weeks into months, nothing really changed between us, and yet everything did. We still had our late-night talks, our laughter, our quiet moments of comfort. But now, they were colored with tenderness and certainty. I didn't have to wonder if he felt the same. I didn't have to hide my jealousy or swallow down my love. I could reach for his hand, lean on his shoulder, kiss him goodnight, and know it was exactly where I belonged. Looking back, I sometimes wonder why it took us so long, why we wasted so many years dancing around the truth. But then I realized maybe our love needed time to grow quietly, deeply, rooted in friendship first. Maybe that's why it survived everything. The fears, the misunderstandings, the storm inside me. Because at the end of it all, love found us anyway. And now, as I sit here with Karis by my side, his head resting on my shoulder as we watch the sun sink low, I can't help but smile. Our story wasn't perfect. It was messy, complicated, full of doubts and detours. But it was ours, and it was real. The boy who once made me feel safe, understood, and cherished had become the man I could finally call mine. And this time, I wasn't letting go.